Most pivot tables are built from one flat table, and that's fine until your data stops being flat. In the real world, customers live in one table, products live in another, and transactions sit somewhere else entirely. And that's where regular pivot tables start to feel limiting. You either end up adding lookup columns, which is essentially duplicating data, or creating calculations that look right but aren't. In this video, I'll show you 3 common reporting problems regular pivot tables struggle with and how Power Pivot solves them properly. And we'll build it step by step from the data model through to the final measures. As usual, you can download the example file from the link in the video description. We've got 3 tables, customers with 1 row per customer. I go to the bottom, you can see we've got 200. And then products with 1 row per product, and subscriptions with 1 row per subscription payment received. Now the subscriptions table is the transaction table. It tells us the payments we've received for each subscription by date, customer ID, product, how many seats, the discount, and revenue received. The customer and products tables hold the descriptive information like region, country, industry, product, and tier. Now a regular pivot table only works when all of that information is in one table. So that means on the subscriptions table, you'd add a column for the customer name, and then you'd use an XLOOKUP or VLOOKUP formula to look up the customer ID in your customers table and return the customer name, and so on and so forth. And you'd repeat that for all of the dimensions you want to analyze your revenue by. And that might work at first, but it creates a bigger table, unnecessary file bloat, and it still doesn't solve all the reporting problems. So instead, we're going to use Excel's Power Pivot data model and its formula language called DAX. Now don't be put off by the name, it's not as scary as it sounds. First, to enable Power Pivot, go to the File tab, down at the bottom left, Options, under Add-ins, click on the drop-down and choose COM Add-ins, click Go, and here make sure Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel is checked. Once you do that, you'll have the Power Pivot tab available on the ribbon. Next, I'm going to format the data in Excel tables. This will enable me to load it to the Power Pivot data model and make it easy to update my reports. So on the Home tab, Format as Table, I'm just going to choose this light style. Click OK. On the Table Design tab in the top left, I'm going to rename this table Customers. And then let's repeat for Products. Rename this one, as you'd expect, Products. And lastly, Subscriptions. And you guessed it, Subscriptions. Now I can go to the Power Pivot tab and add these tables to the data model. That's one. Let's click the Excel icon to go back to Excel, and we'll add the Customers table, and again for the Products table. So what we see here is the Power Pivot window. It's independent of the Excel grid. I'm going to go into Diagram View, and here we can see the 3 tables that we loaded. But Power Pivot still needs to know how they relate to each other. The Subscriptions table has customer ID, and so does the Customers table. So I can connect those 2 tables via that common column. Likewise, the Products table has the product ID, so does the Subscriptions table. So let's drag that over and create a relationship there. And let's just bring our Subscriptions table in between the 2. So we can see the Subscriptions table now has a relationship to the Customers table and Products table. And this is the first major advantage of Power Pivot. We don't have to flatten the data into one giant table with lookup formulas. We can leave each table in its proper structure and connect them with relationships. Now keep in mind that lookup tables, like Products and Customers, must contain a unique list of values. That is, each customer or product should appear only once. It's the same idea as a lookup formula. If the lookup value appears more than once, Excel doesn't have a clear match and the results can be incorrect. Quick heads up before we dive in. If by the end of this video you want to go all in on Power Pivot and DAX, all my courses are 20% off from today through May 14th, including my full Power Pivot and DAX course. It covers everything from building data models to writing complex DAX to time intelligence like year over year and rolling totals. You can find the link in the description and pinned comment. All right, let's keep going. Now that everything's related, I'll close my Power Pivot window. And back in Excel, we can build one pivot table that uses fields from all 3 tables. I've got a sheet already set up here. I'm going to go to the Insert tab, Pivot Table drop-down, and I want to insert a pivot table from the data model. It's going to pop it on the existing worksheet in the cell I had selected. I've got the field list here already open, and you can see all 3 tables are available for me to build a pivot table from. Let's look at the regions in the rows, the product line in the columns, and we'll sum the revenue. And just like that, we've built a pivot table using fields from 3 separate tables. With a regular pivot table, this would require lookup columns or merging the data first. Next, we'll make the calculation more explicit by creating our first DAX measure, which is just a formula you can use in a pivot table. In the pivot table field list, I'm going to right-click on the subscriptions table name and add measure. The measure name is total revenue, and the formula is sum. What am I summing? I want to sum my subscriptions table revenue. Double click to insert it, close parentheses. I can check that my formula is correct. I've got the green check mark, perfect. And let's go and apply some formatting. I'm going to use comma separators, and I want to make sure I've got no decimal places because these are big numbers. We don't need to see the decimals. Click OK. Now if we scroll down to our subscriptions table, you can see my measure prefixed by the FX. So I can add that to my pivot table and remove sum of revenue because essentially they're the same thing. Notice it's already formatted. I don't need to mess about with that. And I can use this measure in any pivot table connected to the model, and more importantly, reference it in other measures, which we'll do later. Now let's look at customer count. I'm going to remove product line just to simplify the table, and I'll add customer ID to the values area. Excel counts the number of subscription rows, but that's not the same as counting customers. Remember, we only had 200 customers. And what we see here is the count of transactions by region. We want to know how many unique customers there are. To fix that, I'll create another measure. Again, on the subscriptions table, right-click, add measure. This one's going to be called customer count. And the function is distinct count. Tab to insert it. What am I counting? Well, I want to go down to my transactions table and count the customer IDs that I've had subscriptions for. Close parentheses on distinct count. Let's check it. It's perfect. Let's format it to use comma separators, no decimal places. And click OK. Now, if we expand the subscriptions table, we've got another measure. We can add it to our pivot table. And now we have the distinct customer count by region. If the same customer has multiple subscriptions, they're still only counted once within each region. Now I can remove the count of customer ID, which is incorrect. Now that we have total revenue and customer count, we can calculate something more meaningful, ARPU. ARPU stands for average revenue per user, or in this case, average revenue per customer. The calculation is pretty simple. It's just revenue divided by customers, but the important part is that the customer count must be a distinct count. Let's right-click subscriptions and add a new measure. This one's called ARPU. And the formula uses the divide function. What are we dividing? The total revenue. And there is our measure there in the IntelliSense. So I'm going to tab to insert it. And the denominator is our customer count. There's our explicit measure there, customer count. Tab to insert it. Now I'm using the divide function instead of the slash operator to divide because the divide function handles divide by 0 errors. So in my alternate result argument, I can have it return a blank as denoted by 2 double quotes. Let me control and mouse scroll up to zoom in on the formula. There's my ARPU formula. Let's check it. Great, we've got no errors. Let's add comma separators and make sure no decimal places. Click OK. There it is in my list. Let's add it to the pivot table. So now we have the total revenue, unique customers, and average revenue per customer by region. And because these are measures, they respond properly as I filter the report by product line, tier, industry, or status, etc. For example, let's add a slicer for the product line. So under products, I can right-click and add as slicer. Now it's hiding behind the field list. Let's bring it over. Now when I click Analytics, Collaboration or Security, the revenue, customer count, and ARPU all update. Now the question you might be asking is, how does the measure actually know what to calculate for each cell? And the answer is something called filter context. every cell in a pivot table has an invisible filter around it. For example, let's change the pivot table to just include the total revenue, and we'll add the tier to the columns. Look at this cell. The row tells us it's the region AMER, the column tells us it's enterprise, and the slicer tells us it's for security customers. That combination, AMER, enterprise, and security, is the filter context for that one cell. And when our measure runs, it only looks at the revenue data that matches all three. Click a different item in the slicer, and now we have new filter context. The measure runs again, just for this combination. And notice the grand total row. There's no region filter there because a total is every region added together. Different filter context, a different number. The measure itself doesn't do anything different, it just runs the same formula every single time. What changes is the filter context it runs inside. Once you understand filter context, DAX measures become easier to write, and Power Pivot starts to feel like that missing layer between raw data and reporting. If you want the full picture, more advanced filter context, essential functions, time intelligence, and all the DAX best practices, my Power Pivot and DAX course covers it. And as a reminder, it's 20% off through May 14th. So if you've been thinking about it, this is the moment. The link's in the description and pinned comment. And it's worth knowing that DAX is one of the skills companies are actually paying for. The kind of skill that shows up on job listings for analysts, finance managers, operations leads, anyone who needs to turn data into decisions. I actually made a whole video on the 3 highest income Excel skills worth learning right now, and DAX is one of them. If you want to see what the other 2 are and why they matter as much, I'll link it right here. I'll see you there.